It's the kind of moment nobody claps for. You're walking through a parking lot and you notice something small tucked near a cart return, staying close to the shadows like it knows it's not welcome. You pause, reach into what you already have, and do a quiet, practical thing. If you've ever done that, this video is not about being nice. It's about what that says about how your mind is built. Most people assume this comes from kindness, like a personality trait you either have or you don't. But a lot of the time, it's something more specific. It's a mind that doesn't need a reward to stay present with vulnerability. It doesn't trade care for applause or safety or proof that it mattered. It acts from internal alignment, even when nobody is watching and nothing is coming back. And that's rare, not because you're morally superior, but because modern life trains people to disconnect fast. We learn to scroll past, rationalize, keep moving, and call that maturity. In a second, I'll show you the first trait that usually gives it away, because it shows up in the most ordinary place, right inside the split second where most people choose not to notice. Let me put this in a normal moment. You're on your way somewhere. Nothing dramatic. You notice something small that needs care, and before you fully think it through, you adjust what you're doing. Not in a heroic way, more like how you'd move your foot to avoid stepping on something fragile. What's happening here isn't generosity in the social sense. There's no calculation, no inner voice asking whether it will matter or whether it will be noticed. The action comes from alignment, not exchange. You're responding to a living situation, not negotiating a return. Psychologically, this is unusual because most human helping behavior is shaped by reciprocity. We help where there's safety, similarity, or some chance of return. But in moments like this, your brain doesn't wait for those conditions. The presence of need is already enough to act. The quiet cost is that this sensitivity doesn't have an off switch. You feel pulls that other people genuinely don't register, not because they're cruel, but because their minds filter differently. Sometimes that means you carry small weights that never make it into conversation. But this isn't weakness, it's coherence. You're not performing care, you're responding to it. That's the first sign you're built around contact, not transaction. And once you see that, you'll notice it again in how you react to unfairness. This trait usually shows up as a quiet resistance. You're in a group, or scrolling, or just passing through the day, and something gets brushed off as normal. Someone shrugs and says, "That's just how it is." And internally, something in you tightens. You don't need a label to explain it. Your mind notices imbalance before it notices comfort. You register when harm gets normalized, especially when it happens to those with no voice or leverage. Not because you're looking for reasons to be upset, but because your sense of fairness doesn't downshift as easily. Most people learn to cope by blunting this response. It's efficient, it keeps life manageable. But if you're wired this way, ignoring injustice feels more disturbing than acknowledging it. Your system treats distortion as something that needs attention, not something to be smoothed over. The cost is subtle. The world can feel heavier, even on good days. You may wish, sometimes, that you could let things slide the way others do, that you could unsee what you've already registered. Still, this isn't fragility. It's intolerance for false balance. You're not trying to be a hero. You just can't comfortably call cruelty normal. And that sensitivity points to the next trait, the way your attention works. Most people move through familiar spaces on autopilot. Their attention narrows to what's useful, urgent, or personally relevant. It's efficient. It saves energy. But some minds don't reduce the field that aggressively. You notice things that aren't central to the task. A detail on the edge of the scene. A presence others have learned not to register. You're not searching for it. Your attention just lands there, the way your eyes adjust to light without being told to. Psychologically, this looks like expanded awareness. Your brain filters less by importance and more by reality. What exists tends to get noticed, whether or not it serves a goal. That makes your experience of the world richer, but also denser. The gentle cost is that noticing more means carrying more. You take in subtle cues, unfinished stories, quiet signals that others never load into memory. It can leave you feeling like the same day hits you harder than it hits everyone else. But this kind of awareness isn't distraction, it's presence. You're not lost in detail, you're open to it. And once you understand that, it becomes clear why praise and approval don't drive you the way they seem to drive other people. This trait shows up most clearly in what you don't do. You help, you adjust, you show up in small ways, and then you move on. There's no instinct to document it, defend it, or turn it into proof. The action feels complete the moment it's done. Psychologically, this points to motivation that isn't wired to external feedback. You don't need reinforcement to know whether something aligned with you. Your sense of right doesn't wait for agreement. It comes from internal coherence, not applause. This is where people misunderstand you. They assume that if you're not broadcasting your values, you must not have any. They trust what's counted, tracked, or praised. When your actions don't leave a trail, some will assume they didn't matter, or that you're naive for not making them visible. The cost here is quiet and social. You may be misunderstood. You may feel invisible in rooms that reward performance over presence. At times, you might wonder whether staying silent makes you easier to overlook. But this isn't passivity, it's freedom. You don't need permission to do what matches you. That independence is a kind of strength people notice only when they don't have it, and it connects directly to the last trait, the one holding everything together. At the core of all this is a relationship with fragility. You don't deny it. You don't armor yourself against it with constant distraction or control. When you notice vulnerability in others or in yourself, you don't immediately pull away. Think back to that tiny moment in the parking lot. Most people aren't monsters. They're just trained to keep moving. Their mind closes the tab fast because it feels safer. Your mind doesn't. You stay with what's real long enough to respond. This doesn't mean you enjoy discomfort. It means your nervous system doesn't treat fragility as a threat that must be erased. You recognize how easily things can break, how temporary stability really is, and instead of numbing that awareness, you remain present with it. The cost is that life rarely feels weightless. You can't fully buy into the illusion that everything is fine all the time. There are moments when you wish you could be less aware, less affected, less open. But this connection is also what keeps your compassion real. You're not caring from a distance. You're caring from contact. Strength, in this sense, isn't about hardness. It's about the capacity to remain human without disconnecting. And that's why these traits tend to travel together. Taken separately, these traits can look like quirks. Together, they form something clearer. You don't just care more. You stay present where most people learn to disconnect. When the world offers efficiency, numbness, or approval as shortcuts to safety, your system doesn't fully take them. You remain engaged with what's real, even when it's inconvenient or unrecognized. That's why you notice, why you respond, why you act quietly and move on. It was never about being softer than others. It was about being less willing to abandon contact. And that choice shapes how you move through the world, often without you realizing it. So the real question isn't whether these traits make you different. It's what that difference is asking of you and how to keep it without turning your whole life into a slow leak. So here's the quiet truth behind all of this. People like you aren't driven by kindness as a performance. You're driven by presence. You stay with what's fragile, unnoticed, or uncomfortable long enough to respond, even when there's nothing in it for you. That doesn't make you better than anyone else. It makes you rarer in a world that rewards disconnection. And if you've ever felt out of place because of it, you're not imagining that feeling. You're noticing a real mismatch between your wiring and the culture's default settings. So let me ask you this. Where in your week do you notice yourself staying present while others pull away? And next time, we'll talk about how to keep this kind of compassion without slowly disappearing in the process.